Hey guys, so I did a reaction to something similar before, but not this actual person. But I think Miss Carnivore is cancer over here, carnism is cancer, needs to hear it again for the, and her other little minions in the back also need to hear it. So let's just get into this. I don't care about the visuals. It's what's being said that's more important. So, I think if you want to try and convince people, I don't know why you call it carnism, because that wasn't a word until some woman in the 80s or some crap made it up. Don't even care enough to research that little sidebar. But anyway, let's just get into this, because vegans, this is why you guys are fooled into being vegan, and this is why carnivores actually...
One.
The heck? Sorry, guys. My voice is talking random crap.
Video player. Button. Heading. Hide player controls.
Hear that? Carnism is cancer. That's how I do things. On my phone. Yeah. So, let's get into this. You can send this all to your friends. Because we're gonna go in and we're gonna go in hard on this. Because, this needs to be heard.
Saturated fat. Many of us, me included, try to avoid eating them.
Saturated fat.
A lot of saturated fat.
Saturated fat.
The true scientific research behind saturated fats.
People have been warned for years about the dangers of eating too many saturated fats and the risks they pose for heart disease.
So your Ansel Keys in the 1950s, middle-aged men seemingly healthy were dropping dead, and Americans need a solution. So you have a hypothesis that you think will save millions from dropping dead of heart disease. After all, you're a physiologist and a biochemist. You know exactly how the body works, and you've seen how arterial plaque is made from cholesterol and...
Now, keep in mind too, people were smoking back then. Hardcore. It was the thing to do. People were also smoking. And Crisco came out in the very, very early 1900s. So they were eating that as well. And now we're going to blame saturated fat? Interesting.
involved in heart disease. You also know that saturated fat is related to cholesterol. So you create the famous diet heart hypothesis that you think links saturated fat to heart disease. But there's just one problem. You need more evidence. You need to show that what you're talking about actually holds true across the world. So you take your test subjects and you start feeding them tons of cholesterol. But for some reason, no matter how much cholesterol you feed them, their levels in their blood just won't go up. So now you need a new way to show the public that saturated fat and cholesterol are bad.
The fact it didn't even work out for him in the very beginning should tell you right there that feeding them more cholesterol, even if he was just a sadistic piece of crap that didn't care if he, somebody could have taken a knife out and he could have said, I want you to take that knife and I want you to stab her in the... He probably was that type of person. He seems like that type of person. But guess what else I'm sure he was doing? He was probably smoking too, and a lot, and probably always constantly too low in nicotine. So he probably constantly needed to be puffing on a you know, every second, every minute he was on a cigarette. So, you know, so I bet you he was that kind of person. He was a very, very mean, evil, horrible person. I'm not even gonna, I have no respect for him at all. For him specifically, no respect, none. Because this guy, he ultimately died of his karma, which was the same diet that he was recommending. He even went on it. Guess what? He died from it. He died of the very thing that he was trying to fix. He didn't want to fix it. He knew that what he really wanted was people to die. I feel like he was that kind of person. I think he knew. He knew, but he just didn't want to, you know, he's like, well, cholesterol it is the enemy. Even though he discovered it wasn't. So really, his mission wasn't to fix anything. His mission was to kill people. That's why I have no respect for Ansel Keys. No respect. And I don't know if I'm sure there are still people related to him that are around. And if any of you guys find this, I hope you don't take this as me hating on you specifically. It's him. He was a very sadistic, evil, horrible human being. And I think even though he died, which I wouldn't wish it on even carnism as cancer over here, but that's ultimately what ends up happening. You know how karma works? What goes around comes around. You're gonna die of the very thing you're threatening people will die from. You're gonna, you know, you wanted people to die, Mr. Ansel Keys. So you had it coming. You weren't there to fix people and make people better off. You were telling them to continue eating the Crisco and smoking. Even though that's what they were doing before. So you just, no, continue eating that stuff. In fact, cut out the meat fats altogether.
It's simple. You know the chief killer of Americans is cardiovascular disease, disorders and degeneration of the heart and blood vessels. Here are vital statistics. They show that this problem here in America is the worst in the world.
And this is where your famous 7-country study comes into play. All you have to do to create this data is find countries that have a low saturated fat intake and low heart disease, cherry pick the ones that had high saturated fat intake and high heart disease, and boom, the 7-country study was formed. Finally, your hypothesis has been proven, and with this newfound knowledge given to the public, you will now save millions of lives for people now opting for grain, sugar, and seed oil based foods that are very low in saturated fat. But there was just one issue. There was data available for 22 countries, but you already got everyone on board, and your research funding relies on this hypothesis. So maybe we'll just sweep this under the rug and stick to our cornerstone 7-country study.
Are you hearing this, vegans? Are you hearing this? I did a video on this years and years ago. Okay, maybe not years and years ago. Dave Mack did a video about this very thing, and I think it's important to bring to light.
So, by 1961, the American Heart Association started to recommend that butter should be replaced with highly processed seed oils like margarine, and that animal fats should be avoided so that we can all lower our cholesterol levels. Then, by 1970, the United States Department of Agriculture, or the USDA, brought forward the food pyramid. You watch as the world embraces your low-fat, high-carb idea. The American Heart Association and the USDA are on board, reshaping the nation's diet, all based on your one extremely poorly designed study. You have now become the hero in the fight against heart disease.
Oh yeah, the hero. Meanwhile, heart disease is in children now. Teenagers. What a hero. What a freaking hero.
But as the 1970s rolled in, something's just not adding up. The nation, following your guidance, is cutting down on fats, yet health problems are escalating.
Yep, true hero, people.
Obesity rates are climbing, diabetes is spreading, and heart disease is still a leading cause of death.
Look at people from the 40s, vegans. They certainly weren't vegans. I'm sure plenty of them ate plenty of meat with the high fats, probably even the organs. Vegans, look into it. Veganism started in the 1800s, sure, but I mean, back then, not everybody believed it. Back then, not everyone believed it. I'm sure people... Like, it was only a select few that followed the Seventh-day Adventists. So, it's... it was not as well known as it is now. And it's all because of this Ansel Keys that now people are actually thinking that because of this one study that he did in the 50s that now everybody's getting on board. They think that he is the best guy that's ever lived and all this crazy crap. Meanwhile, you can look at the people in the 30s and 40s, 1930s, 1940s, and be like, wait, most of them are actually quite slim and healthy and strong. What is going on here from the 40s to the 80s? It isn't adding up. But no, he was apparently a complete and total hero, you guys.
People are questioning the narrative, but you're too deep in. Your study has...
You see how this works? This is exactly what you vegans do. When carnivores finally figure it out.
influenced millions.
You will thank me later.
Retracting now would be admitting to an unforgivable mistake. Your influence is undeniable. Doctors, nutritionists, and even the government have bought into the low-fat ideology. The food industry is turning out low-fat products, and your hypothesis has become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Here's new Kellogg's low-fat granola bars. All that crunchy granola, but only half the fat of the leading crunchy granola bar.
Kellogg's low-fat granola bars?
That can't taste good. I'm trying to imagine these low-fat granola bars. No wonder I always hated granola bars. Like, the low-fat ones, no wonder I always hated them because it was like, they're dry, they're hard, and they taste like, oh, I can't even describe it. I may as well be back in the Great Depression when there was literally nothing but like flour and water. Blech.
These are good.
You might be wondering what exactly is so wrong about the 7-country study. Well, the first and obvious is that there were 22 countries to pull data from. And when we look at the data from all 22 countries, the correlation isn't as obvious.
I wonder how they were able to like write it in the actual documentation though, like, since I can't see, maybe he's showing it, but since I can't see it, like how, I never understood, like, so you got these 22 countries, how would you know there were 22 countries originally? And then was there written so would it be that there was written documentation on the 22 countries and then like you revise it and remake it so that it only talks about 7? Is that how that works? How else would people have known? Sorry, I thought there was a fly in here or something, but it's something outside.
So depending on who you ask, there's no correlation at all, or at best, a very weak correlation between saturated fat consumption and deaths from heart disease. But let's give Ansel the benefit of the doubt here. Let's say there is a clear correlation, and we can go based on his extremely poorly designed 7 countries.
If that were true, then everybody would be thriving on his diet. Enough said.
Study. Well, first off, correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because something is correlated, does that mean that was the thing that caused it? In Canada, where I live,
Apparently not. The proof is in when you watch Lorenzo's Oil, okay? Now, he's a very special case. So that's why I'm not going to bash him for having an oil, right? But they were cutting out all fats from his diet, right? Even peanut butter, plant fats they were cutting out. And guess what was happening? More degeneration, right? You guys need to watch this stuff because you really start to understand that it's not all black and white.
there seems to be a lot of ambulances wherever there is a medical emergency. Does that mean the ambulances cause the medical emergencies?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, of course not. So now we know that correlation doesn't mean causation, and these two things can be completely unrelated. But this isn't the only issue with an observational study of this kind. For starters, surveying people on what they eat can be extremely inaccurate. For most people who eat a wide variety of foods, it can be extremely difficult to guess how much of what food was eaten over weeks, months.
I couldn't even tell you how often I'd eat bacon versus how often I eat beef. Like, I wouldn't know how many days a week I've had bacon and then how many other days a week I had beef in that same week, rather. Because it differs. Sometimes I'm in the mood for bacon more so than beef, and sometimes I'm in the mood for beef more so than bacon. I can't even remember the last time I had liver, so there's also that.
Or even years. This leads to my next point, confounding factors. Confounding factors are other factors that come into play that could affect the data. For example, if you ask someone how much meat they ate in the past week and then strictly base your results on the amount of meat and nothing else, you don't account for all of the different ways that meat could have been eaten. Was it in a double cheeseburger from McDonald's? Was it a hot dog from Costco? Or was it just a full ribeye on its own with maybe a bit of salt? But it's not just the food, there are also lifestyle factors. Are people who eat more meat also more likely to smoke? Are they more likely to not exercise, etc.? As you can see, the results get muddied very quickly. And this is why it's
You see, vegans? You see? That's why you can't just blame meat for everything.
so crazy to think that we could
Oh, and carnism is cancer. Hi.
base the entire food pyramid and heart healthy recommendations based on this data. If anything, this data should have made it very clear that we didn't know exactly what caused these diseases and that we needed to do far more research before we came to any conclusions. And what makes this even crazier is after all these recommendations were put into place and diseases skyrocketed even further, we still fall back on these recommendations to this day.
15 public schools in Brooklyn, we will be instituting Meatless Mondays.
Boo. See, this, and it's all because of this guy from the 50s. It's all because of him. Now, they're thinking about less meat, no meat, no meat.
Now,
Woohoo. Because we all know it isn't true, and yet you're still pushing it. Woo.
I'm not saying there's some global conspiracy and they're trying to make everyone sick, but let's just think about the incentives here. Nowadays, many of the nutritional studies that follow many of these same flawed parameters as the 7 country study are funded by giant corporations like Nestle and Coca-Cola. They also have no obligation to publish certain studies if they go against their agenda. So how likely is it that these big corporations that make billions off selling processed foods that are grain and carb based, which are perfectly aligned with the bulk of the food pyramid, have our best interests in mind? After all, over 70% of Americans at this point are either overweight or obese. This is one of the main reasons why nutrition seems to be so complicated nowadays. So many people are pushing flawed studies that they draw conclusions from which should have never even been considered in the first place. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, how do we properly control these studies then? Well, we can't. To have a properly controlled study, you would have to lock two twins in a lab from birth and control every single aspect of their being to ensure that they are all the same. Obviously, we can't do this. We've been looking in the wrong place, and when you look in the wrong place, you're gonna get the wrong answers. The questions that we should be asking are, what foods are we meant to consume? What is our physiology designed for?
And it's funny because vegans ask this, sometimes vegans will ask this too. Honey, if you actually ask that question and you're like, no, that's not right, it wasn't meat, then honey, go out into the woods and grab yourself some fruits and leaves and have at it. And leave us out of it. Let's see how long you last out there, because I guarantee you, the human civilizations that tried, none of them are here anymore. None of them are here. Yeah.
If we've eaten something for the majority of our evolution, it is most likely going to be perfectly in line with our physiology. Do you really think highly processed seed oils that have just recently sprung into existence are going to be metabolized better in our bodies than, say, something like fatty red meat, which we have eaten for millions of years? It's highly unlikely. But now you might say, okay, but our ancestors only lived till like 35. But this is mostly because most babies died at birth, drastically reducing the average lifespan. And we do have the longest life expectancy ever recorded now. This is because our medical system has had some amazing breakthroughs allowing us to dramatically reduce mortality of newborns. But although our life expectancy is longer than ever, we are also sicker than ever. We are alive, but we are unwell. We need to get back to our roots of eating primarily fatty red meat from large ruminant animals.
And that is how we ate for the majority of our existence. Excuse me. Vegans are going to sit here and say, but it depended on where you were. Maybe, but don't sit here and pretend that the Chinese and the Japanese are better off because they eat plants. That's not the case at all. The Japanese that ate very, very little meat also didn't develop very well. They didn't grow to as high of a height as they could have. Once they started including meat again, the children were healthier and taller and stronger. So even the Asians don't thrive on the amount of plants that we're told they do. They don't. They need just as much meat as the rest of us. Why would you end it like that? You didn't fade it out or nothing. Okay. That's the only criticism I have of that video. But the reason I was showing you this, I have explained it all. I have another video that I'm planning to upload. I might upload that one after this one. Because that way because I mentioned carnism is cancer in this video. And because my last video was about her, I will definitely be uploading this one next. It makes more logical sense. So this one's going up first, and then I will upload the other one maybe tomorrow. Not sure. But guys, that is it for this. I hope you've all taken notes, and I'm going to keep revisiting this. This is important. So if you saw my last one on pretty much the same matter, but just with someone else talking about it, then yeah, I'm going to probably revisit it maybe next year or the year after. As long as people still believe that you can eat either whatever you want or be healthy as a vegan, I'm going to keep bringing this up because this needs to be talked about more. And more and more and more channels are talking about this too. I don't know if you've seen the channel No Lab Coat Required. He talks about it. His is very, very, very long too. His goes into a lot of depth. I might not react to that one because that one is kind of long. What I've learned covered it. There are a lot of channels out there now that have covered it. Dr. Barry's covered it. Nina Teicholz talks about it. Yeah. Zoe Harcombe, I believe, talks about it. So many people. So many. I don't know about RFK Jr. I don't know if he talks about that or not specifically, but I know he talks about how the poison in our processed foods, mainly the seed oils and the sugar. Chris Palmer talks about stuff like this. There are so many people out there talking about this stuff. And you vegans want to insist, we ate plants. We lived on plants. Well, go to the woods then and eat the plants. That's the best way you can get them, is naturally from the woods. Go. Stop telling us what to do. You go into the woods and eat your own dang plants. Okay? It's much more vegan to do it that way because don't sit here and try to tell me, oh, but it's better for the planet. It's not better for the planet if you're waiting for something to be imported from the freaking Dominican Republic or maybe nothing from there. I don't know. From South America, from Asia, from the warmer states in North America. Like, that's as local as you're going to get, probably, from the warmer states. But other stuff is coming from South America and Asia. And you're going to sit here and tell me that this is better for the planet? Get the freak out of here. If you really were vegan, you'd be going into the woods and picking the things you wanted to eat. You'd be picking the fruits. You'd be picking the leaves. You'd be picking the stalks. You'd be eating that. You'd be eating the seeds. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Prove to me that you can actually live that way. But to be truly, truly vegan, you must be living in the woods, living off the land, eating all the plants you can find. All right? You better get a good stock up on things too, because winter's coming. You better get a good stock up. All right, vegans, that's it for this. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. By the way, my next video isn't actually talking about carnivore or vegan. Maybe some of you vegans might end up having a little more respect for me when I start talking about what I plan to talk about the next video. It's already pre-recorded, actually. So, but you're going to hear everything. All right? Later, guys.